Good morning and welcome to What's Working Wednesday here on the Step by Step Listening page. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Cheryl Andrews. I'm the founder of the company and I am committed 100% to helping you understand what it is that creates that overwhelm, that indecision, that feeling of stuckness so that you can get clarity of what you want and the confidence to make it happen. There is nothing worse in this world than feeling stuck. Or unable to get yourself heard or understood, or even to hear and understand yourself. It's really frustrating. It's really draining, both for you and the people that you work and live with. So welcome to What's Working Wednesday's video. I've been away on my retreat sabbatical for 2 weeks at the end of March, and I've really enjoyed seeing in the season of spring. So that said, I've had to put the lighting on today, so it looks like I've got sun shining on me, but it's actually an artificial light. Although the mornings are lighter, and it's great listening to the music of the birds, and generally just waking up earlier again. It's still a little bit dull here in the UK. So today I want to talk to you about how does writing a book prevent overwhelm. And if you do join me this morning, please let me know you're here, say hi, and let me know any questions, or let me know what your triggers are for overwhelm. What is it you want to do? And I'll ask you some questions during the live Q&As in the Manager Critic group. So I want to talk today about a few things that have been happening for me over the 2 weeks I've been off. I've been reading, first and foremost, the book, When Dad Become Joan, Life with My Transgender Father. And this is obviously definitely for you if you are going through massive change, particularly things like transgender, and you want to hear how it's impacting your family and how perhaps you can support them. Because this is Cass' story about her dad 30 years ago when he let her know that he was going to change from being a man to a woman, and how that impacted her. But the big thing in it is that she was told to keep it a secret. She had no one to talk to. And one of the big things about overwhelm is that in order to manage our thoughts, we are, as human beings, we have an internal reference point in our system. So that's what goes on inside us. And we have our external reference. So it's the stuff that stimulates us. So things that we see, hear, smell, taste, touch. It's things that people say. And so over the holidays, I was reading it, and I've just started to do the workbook. So I just want to do a quick shout out for that, and I will put a link in below to say, because the first section here talks about values. So one of the things when I talk about books is two things. If you're the reader of a book, how it can help you with overwhelm, and also how it can cause problems, so you know why, and you can do something about it. So we can get these books, okay, they're fabulous. And the reason why they work sometimes is because we can self-coach, we can ask ourselves questions, we work through the workbooks. Good morning, DL, lovely to see you, haven't seen you for ages. But also because we have our externally referenced sometimes we need to hear it outside. So one of the things you can do if you're working through a book like Cass is record the questions and listen back to them, or even record yourself answering the questions so that you get an external auditory awareness of it. Which brings me on to the subject today. Why does writing a book prevent overwhelm? For me personally, when I'm working with the authors in partnership with Karen Williams from Libertas, one of the things that writing a book does is that you are committing to yourself to put your thoughts, your feelings, your process, your story, your emotions down in writing to be published, and they're going to be permanent. When we speak, often to friends, family, or even to ourselves, we don't always pay attention to what we're actually saying. We just say it, and we're not really consciously aware of what we're saying, why we're saying it, and what that really means to us. What's the purpose of saying it? And the whole process at Step by Step Listening is about me listening to the clients and actually asking them questions and then reflecting back exactly what they've said. And that's what a book does for you as an author. When you start to write about your experiences, you start to see, hear, and externally experience your story outside of you. So that's one reason, is that the book helps prevent overwhelm, is because you start to hear what it is you're actually saying. And then you have to be really clarifying with yourself, getting clarity. So asking questions, checking your language, noticing where your attention is, get feedback from people, check whether or not your story is coming from a place of victim or persecutor, or are you the hero of this story? Are you sharing the lessons that you learned, or you complaining about what wasn't working for you or what wasn't fair. And usually for us in life, generally, we stay in overwhelm when we stay in drama, when we are working at what's not fair, it's not okay. And that part needs to be heard. It's a really important part. That's why counsellors exist. That's why we have our friends to go, oh, this is really frustrating me. We've got to be able to tell that bit. But if you wrote a whole story, it's like if you watch EastEnders and every single part of it was drama, although I think from the last time I ever watched it was about 10 years ago, you know, if it was all drama, or we watch a movie where it's all low mood, we eventually like that. So the reason that drama works is when it's balanced with anticipation, good news, aspiration, dreams, hope. And so if we are telling a story to ourselves that's all about what's not working, about the victim, the persecutor, the rescuer, that kind of drama stuff going on, it actually brings our energy down, it brings our motivation down, and that's when we stay in overwhelm. When you write a book, because you're committing to the purpose of getting a particular message across to a particular person, whilst you are going to tell your story, you have to update the story to say, you know, this was terrible, this happened to me in the past, it really hurt me, and this is what I've learned from it, this is the lesson. And that is the thing that for me, writing my first book gave me the opportunity to tell the whole of my story. It meant people who were on the journey with me, my book mentor Karen, my peer review team, people who read the book got to hear the whole story. Bits of my story are still not in that original book because once they've been heard, I didn't need to put them in the book, but that was important therapeutically for me. But then in order to make the good book of value, I had to update my story, stop telling it from the victim state, but to tell it from the lesson that's been learned from that. Good morning, Chris, Tracy, also Lorna, thank you for joining me. We're just talking today about how does writing a book prevent overwhelm. So the first thing you're doing is you have to go through the clarity process. You have to tell your story in the book from a hero's point of view. So if you do one thing from this video, think about the story that you're telling yourself about your life right now. Is it all about how I haven't got time, or I haven't got any money, I can't afford it? Or are you talking strength and solution focused? Are you talking about what you want, or what's working, or what has worked, or what's that taught you? So for example, what I'm noticing in myself since I wrote the first book is because I had to go through that process of actually writing my story out, and then the next iteration was to decide which parts of the story were the most important part, what was going to get me the response that I wanted, what was going to give the reader the most benefit, what was going to help the reader. I had to edit it out. And that's what I'm doing with my clients when I reflect things back to them. It's like they have to work out, you know, how many times you need to say the same thing. So listen to your patterns, listen to the stories you're telling to you. And when you write a book and you're committing to put it in print, you're committing to put it out there to the world, you have to update your story. You cannot keep telling the woe is me story because people are not going to learn from that. There's an immediate instant feeling of, oh, thank goodness it's not just me. When you tell a best friend that, you know, oh, this so-and-so person's really doing my head in, blah, blah, you have your moan, your groan, and someone says, oh, that's really awful, or, yeah, that happened to me too. There's an instant sense of relief because we, as human beings, we like to feel that it's not just us. That's one of the big things, you know, is it just me is one of the questions many of my clients ask me. So once we know it's not just us, that's okay, but it's like, okay, well, so now we're all miserable and we're all not working. The bit that actually gets people to listen, and this is about your own, in your own head listening to you and other people listening to you, other people reading your book in this particular case, is if you can air what's not working and then either say what you'd like to have happen, what you want instead of what you don't want, or you can talk about what that situation's taught you. What's the lesson that you've learned from it? What's the thing that you're grateful for about it? So I want you to think about that today. What's the story that you're telling yourself? And if you were to write a book and you were to look back over your life right now, what are the, let's say, 7 or 8 key turning points from the day you were born to now? What was, if you had to pick some key turning points in your life, what were they? When I wrote my first book, the key turning points for me were my personal development journey, when I came across coaching and listening skills and started to learn about myself. And as I started to write that in my book, I started to relearn those lessons that I learned 10 years ago because I was now teaching it to somebody else in my book. So that's why another reason why a book helps you to manage overwhelm is because you become consciously aware and curious about your story, past tense, but you're also curious about what you're learning from those key points, those turning points, and you're repeating that lesson to yourself. So you're taking your learning to another level. So as a coach, I now coach people and I teach other people how to listen without judgment to themselves, so that they can manage their critic and they can turn overwhelm into clarity. So then I talk people through the process. Well, for me, I didn't realize I had a clarity process until I started writing the book. I was doing it, I was getting success, but I didn't know how to actually articulate it. And it was only when I started to model it out and I looked at what worked for me. So I went back over my story and I remembered that people who taught me things that spelt out a word, it made it easier for me. So at the moment I'm doing Miracle Mornings and they have the word savers. And so it's easy for me. I know the word savers there. I have it on my board and I know the S stands for silence and A is for affirmation and V is for visualization and E is for exercise and R is for reading and S is for scribing. So I know in order to set myself up for success in the morning, because I've got that acronym, I can check in with myself. Whereas it just said 6 steps, I probably wouldn't remember them. When I came to write my book, I had a process that I was taking my clients through. So the first thing was clarity, was the C was asking questions. The next thing was paying attention to their language. The next thing was looking at where their attention is, whether it's past, present, was it about themselves or other people. I was looking at, how they responded to feedback. Were they hearing what was being said? Were they projecting out on other people? So I was looking at the reflections all about the feedback process. Intention was, are they in drama? Are they stuck in blaming other people or blaming themselves? I was looking at T, do they trust their own process? Do they even know their own process? Are they taking their own advice? And the why is, the story that they're telling themselves. Is the story they're telling themselves true? So when you write a book, there is something that magical happens when you commit to saying, I'm going to put this in writing. I'm going to put it out to the universe. It's going to be permanently in black and white and it can't be changed. You have to start to take your own conversation with yourself seriously. You have to take your own process, your own journey, your own life to another level. You have to learn your own stuff in a much more detailed way. If you're a trainer, you can talk and people say things and you interact and you engage with the audience. When you're writing a book, you have to really be able to do this for yourself on your own. And that is why writing a book can actually really take you personally, your growth of yourself and your knowledge and your wisdom to another level, because you can not only edit it for the benefit of the reader, but you start to edit it for yourself. So how you feel about yourself is absolutely going to change just as a direct result of writing the book. So good example for me, I was out this week, I was out yesterday actually, met up with Susie Friday, my Facebook manager, and a number of our work colleagues, also Karen Williams, and people were saying, oh, you look amazing, Cheryl, you look like you're really standing tall. And I started thinking about what has changed in the last 18 months. Well, the first thing is I published my book. The second thing is that I hit 50 and made a project this year to decide to love the whole of me. So I'm actually going through my whole body each week, each day, and taking a different part of me, my eyes, my nose, my chin, I'm up to throat at the moment. And I'm looking at the story that I'm telling myself. I'm sure this will be a book in the future, A Year to Love Your Whole of You. But for me, it's a personal reflection journey at the moment, using as a journal. So that's one thing that's changed. The other thing is I've started to write book number 2. So while you guys are all on, you're very patient, you're here. And if you've got any questions, please. Oh, actually, it's come up with 2 comments, but it hasn't come up. Let me see if I can find those. No, that's really weird. I've got a wave. Oh, hello from DL and a wave. So that's the 2 comments. That's great. So if you've got any questions at all about book writing or overwhelm, please put them in while I'm on the call. But what I'd like to do is just have a bit cheeky and tell you about book number 2 and ask you for your feedback and your thoughts. She says, trying to find it. Here it is. So book number 2 is going to be all about the do, delegate or ditch process. So book number 1 was about manage your critic, turning things from overwhelm to clarity. It was helping you understand the 7 steps, a basic process to help you get clarity of what you want. by understanding the story that you're telling yourself. So I've gone through that very quickly now. Do, delegate, or ditch is more about, so once you've made a decision, we often have this instant relief, like, do you know, if you've been toying about what to buy someone for Christmas, or you're thinking about buying a new car, or try and choose, in my case, I've just been doing the bedroom over the time we've been off, so try and choose wallpaper, colours, etc. And you're trying things on for size, you're looking at things, you're trying things out, and you're in that kind of decision-making phase. Once, it can be quite tiring, and then when you've made the decision, you can feel absolutely amazing and absolutely elated. And that is, for me, what happens between overwhelm and clarity, is a decision is made. And for many of my clients, as soon as they've made a decision, they instantly take action. They become motivated. They know that the decision is right for them, and therefore action happens and change happens. And then they learn to celebrate that change as it goes along, because that's part of the process that we work with. But what most people don't know is what I'm doing in terms of the way that I'm asking questions, what I'm putting people's attention on. And so part of it is that sometimes they believe they've just made a decision. But the reason why some decisions don't stick is because they're not inclusive enough. So Do, Delegate, or Ditch is book number 2. And it will be talking about how to make good decisions that stick. The ones that stay, that become, that, you know, that they become right on a whole level. And the main thing about is most of our decisions are not inclusive enough. So what I'm doing now is writing out, I've just done the content page for book number 2. And so I'm just going to talk you through a little bit of that, and also just to explain why that is now giving me more clarity and how that is managing my overwhelm. So I've got my content page, I've got introduction, I'm going to talk about why I wrote the book, then I'm going to put how to make a good decision, why clarity alone is not enough. And that's because sometimes just making a decision isn't enough. You might know what you want to do, but then there is still something that stops you. You know what you want, but you still don't do it. And so the next chapter is about why is independence overrated? And the reason why decision making on your own can be very difficult is the reality. It doesn't matter what decision you're going to make. When you act on your decisions, it will have an impact. Now, it'll have an impact on you. It will have an impact on your immediate people, whether it's your business people, your clients, your staff, or your family and friends. It will have an impact on your community. It will have an impact on your country, and it will have an impact globally. You may not be consciously aware of it, but everything that we do, from whether we decide to buy food with plastic in it, whether we decide to drive cars, fly, everything that we do, every decision we make, for what we eat. So if I choose to eat really rubbish food and I have no energy and I'm lethargic, then I won't be necessarily as effective in business. I won't necessarily be as effective at home. That will then have a knock-on impact. And so therefore the whole cycle, every decision is just like that drop in an ocean, has a ripple effect and impacts so many things, that often when we've made a decision, if that decision is only about what we want and we haven't considered the impact it's going to have on everything else, our subconscious kind of knows it and is aware of it. So you'll kind of get a feeling about it, but you won't have necessarily the language to articulate it. And that's because the decision isn't inclusive enough. And so the book then talks about how independence is overrated, that we have to, in order to make decisions, it has to be a decision that is not okay just for us, but it's okay for other people too. I've also put it's not about gender, and it's just an overview that people think that we've got compartmentalization, which is often deemed as being something that's very masculine, that men compartmentalize things, whereas women connect everything to the dots. And whilst I do agree that generally women will have a different thinking process when it comes to decision to men, both men and women can compartmentalize and can make connections with everything. And it's when we can do both that our decision making process becomes more inclusive. So it includes the logical part of the brain and the emotional part of the brain. It's the impact it's going to have on other people, not just about self-preservation, about us being okay. So what do you need to do to have an inclusive decision? is I've just realised I'm reading this off the screen and I can't see what's going on Facebook. So let me just come back to see if there's no questions. Is that the inclusive decision for me is about checking, is your decision wide enough? So I want you to think about your decisions right now. If your decision is only including you, but it's not including what happens at work, what impact is it going to have? So let's say you decide, right, I'm going to get fit and I want to lose weight. So I'm going to train for 2 hours a day and I'm going to only eat this kind of food and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. It's like when you do that, what happens to work and what happens to family and friends? If you haven't considered the other aspects of your life, then you won't have strategies for managing your time. Maybe you'll need to reduce how many hours you work. The great thing about being self-employed is that we can choose to work less hours, we can be more efficient, we can put our attention on certain things if we want to claw time back for fitness, health and well-being. If you're going to change the way you eat, you're going to have to communicate with your family and friends, because when you go out and you're going to share things that they're used to you doing and you're now going to do it differently, you're going to have to communicate it. So often if you make a decision that's very independent, I see this where this compartmentalizing happens. So people will make a decision for their business, right, I'm going to focus on this, I'm going to do and I'm going to get loads of business, I want to make more money. They haven't considered the impact it's going to have on their health or their well-being, on them personally, and they haven't looked at what it's going to impact their friends and their family, their support network, in terms of time and quality of time with people. So if your decision isn't wide enough, invariably it won't be stickable, it won't stay. The other thing is your decision deep enough? So again, often we can make decisions that if we're in overwhelm, we'll make what I call fight, flight or freeze decisions. We're going to make them very quickly because we're just trying to get ourselves out of danger. So it's instant gratification, instant satisfaction, put my teeth around that word. So often we're making a decision that is okay for now, but not necessarily going to be okay in 3 months' time, 3 years' time, 10 years' time. So one of the reasons when you write a book, because it's going to have longevity, because the book is going to be around long after you die, you're forced to think about the impact it's going to have on long term. You can't just be communicating stories that are only going to help somebody out right now and that are only going to be valid for the next 6 weeks. That's a blog. It's something that can change. A book's more permanent. So you are forced when you write a book to think in the longer term. Likewise, when you write a book, you can't be narrow. You have to look at the impact over a wider picture. So this is why even writing a book helps your decision-making process become wider and deeper, because you can't just communicate the instant stuff. You have to have something that's got longevity. So for you personally, when you think about your own overwhelm, think about, are your decisions just instant ones? So a bit like if you choose to, food's a good one, you might eat the chocolate right now because it instantly feels like a reward, it tastes nice, it feels good, it gives you a sugar boost because maybe you're stressed right now. But the long-term effect is maybe, if you notice or pay attention, you might find you might feel a bit sick afterwards, your head's a bit cloudy, or that when you come down from the sugar high, you don't feel so good, you feel very sleepy. So even within a few minutes, you probably notice that the actual chocolate doesn't leave you feeling amazing. And if you continue to eat that kind of thing, then maybe, you might gain weight, you'd feel unhealthy. So your productivity would be impacted, things would be impacted at work, with home, self-esteem, self-confidence. So the long-term effects of eating that kind of food on a regular basis. So whilst it was okay for a short-term decision, the long-term won't be there. Likewise with if you're somebody who spends money, then the minute you've got it, you spend it. You'll get an instant gratification. You'll feel good because you've bought something, you've got something new. It feels great because you've got it in your hands. It feels amazing. You're proud of yourself. There's a sense of achievement. It's instant. You have it right now. But what you won't have is necessarily resources for the future. So maybe you'll be buying those things without any provision for pensions or retirement planning, etc. And often when it comes to financial decisions, we're buying things because it makes us feel good about ourselves right now, but it's things that will depreciate. They're not an asset. They're not going to help. So we're not spending money on things that will actually help us to grow our portfolio, to grow our wealth. So that's one of the things that the next book is going to be talking about. I'm aware I've been going on for a little bit now, so I'm not going to go through the whole lot. There's another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more steps included in what makes an inclusive decision. And I'll leave you with that as a bit of a teaser. But ultimately, what I'm hoping you're hearing is that in order for me now to have written that down and go, okay, that's what I'm going to write a book about, I am now, even communicating with you today about that book, I'm like, okay, so how many of my decisions are very instant right now, and how many of my decisions are serving me today and serving me in the future? Are they aligned? Are those decisions serving me and the people that I love and care about and the things that I care about? So is it a decision that's serving the planet, and is it serving my family? And so just by writing my book, I am going to be having to listen to and take my own advice to a whole new level. And that's where the overwhelm goes, because you have to listen to yourself. You have to pay attention to what you've got to say. You do matter. Your story is of value. And writing a book teaches you how to tell your story in a way that is palatable for other people to hear. It's something that other people can learn from, which means you will also learn how to tell yourself your own stories in a way that's palatable for you and that you will learn from. So rather than getting caught up in the overwhelm and the drama, the woe is me story, you're going to be telling the hero story, the lesson that's been here to be learned, the gift that's in this situation. And yes, there are some extreme stuff in our lives that are really awful, and the grief and the loss have to be honoured, and that's a journey and that's a process. And it's not about saying you have to be happy all the time, but it is recognising that every single thing in our life teaches us something. Even if it's teaching you what you don't want any more of or what you'd like less of, it's a lesson. And the quicker we can learn those lessons, the easier it is to show up as the whole of us and be happy with who we are. So I've had lots of likes. I will just want to check, is there any comments or questions? And if not, my call to action today at the end of this What's Working video is to say, please share with me what's working with you at the moment. Tell me about your story. What one thing will you do different necessarily as a result of watching this video? So a couple of calls to actions, isn't it here? Actually, I'll scrub all that. What I'd like to know is, have you ever thought about writing a book? Have you ever said to yourself in your head, one day I'm going to write a book? Or have you ever said it out loud, one day I'm going to write a book? I'd like to know about that, because I'd also like to find out what I can do through the videos to encourage you to get that book written, because it has absolutely transformed my life. It has given me greater clarity of what I know and what my journey and my story have taught me so far. And I'm really excited about book number 2, because I know it's going to take that learning of myself to a whole new level. And not only will I grow, but I know that I've had the reviews, I've had the feedback, I can see how my book is reaching more people that I could never have reached one-to-one. And I know it's permanent now, it's there, it's on Amazon, and it can continue to be available to the world long after I've gone. So not only will it be good for me now short term, it's going to be good for the planet on a long-term basis. It's going to have longevity. That decision to write the book is going to have a massive impact. It's got a legacy thing that's going on. And if you've got that niggle in your heart to write a book, but something keeps stopping you, your critic inside or outside, I'd like to know about it, to see what I can do through videos, through blogs, through newsletters, to inspire you to take your book and get it out there to the world. Lots of love to everybody. Speak to you soon.